That's a very important political marker. But he's now got this dilemma where he won all of the support on the back of an agenda that he can't possibly enact unless he can get support from the state government. And that means getting support from all of these state level legislators who come from hundreds of miles away from New York City and represent very different districts and don't really care that much about any of these issues.
Well, shall we talk a bit more about American politics? Because it is a big moment today. It's the first big election night in America since Donald Trump came into power, and his rivals, the Democrats, have done better than they maybe had hoped. They won 2 races for state governor in New Jersey and Virginia, and had wins in local races in California and Pennsylvania too. But the most eye-catching result was the election of Zohran Mamdani as mayor of New York. He's been feuding with the president for some time, and in his victory speech, it was clear that he will continue to take on Donald Trump.
If anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. And if there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one. So, Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
Well, that was part of Zohran Mamdani's victory speech. It's worth a read or a watch back if you can find it somewhere, just to see what he's all about. So let's talk to Joseph Sternberg, who's the editorial board member at the Wall Street Journal and a regular guide to American politics on this programme. Good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, it's quite a rousing speech, isn't it? Are people looking at Mamdani and thinking he could be the new Barack Obama?
Maybe. I mean, one thing that we have to understand right at the beginning is that it is actually not at all unusual in the history of New York City politics that people would elect as their mayor someone who is very much on the far left. In fact, most recently, they did that when they elected Bill de Blasio as the mayor, and he was the mayor of New York during President Trump's first term. And clearly his election didn't say anything at all about the willingness of the broader American electorate to support conservatives or Democrats. I think that New York City is just such an unusual place that it's difficult to read too much of a national trend into this. I mean, I do think that it is important because, Democrats were watching this race very closely. Mamdani represents a wing of the far left of the Democratic Party that is very keen to play a much more prominent role in Democratic Party politics. And his big victory in this election is going to embolden them. But I think that the Democrats actually have to look at these results and make some important decisions, because while Mamdani was winning with an explicitly socialist far-left agenda in New York City, the 2 Democrats who won governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia were doing it by running much more to the center. So I think that there's a very mixed message for Democrats about what their way forward is going to be in heading into the midterm election nationally next year.
And that's what makes Mamdani so interesting as a politician, because we were talking yesterday on this programme in the context of British politics about the need for honesty, and that's something that the Labour Party, the government, made a speech, very honest speech about the realities of the budget. We saw Nigel Farage of Reform UK make a very honest speech about promises he can't keep. And yet in this election in New York, it seems that part of his appeal is that he's making really big promises like free buses, rent control, things that really he probably cannot achieve.
It's even worse than that, because, I mean, it's not just a matter of the political or economic practicality of any of this. I mean, just as a technical legal matter, a New York mayor doesn't have the authority to do any of this. They're completely beholden to the New York State governor up in Albany, couple hundred miles away from New York City to give them permission to do any of this. And the reason for that is that throughout the 20th century, New York was so terribly governed by far left mayors that over time, the state government had to take over more and more responsibility just so they wouldn't have to keep doing financial bailouts for the city. So Mamdani is in this position where he's definitely won a big victory, and we shouldn't detract from that. And we should take seriously the fact that there was a lot of economic discontent, especially among young people, young professionals in New York City, that has fueled his rise. That's a very important political marker. But he's now got this dilemma where he won all of the support on the back of an agenda that he can't possibly enact unless he can get support from the state government. And that means getting support from all of these state level legislators who come from hundreds of miles away from New York City and represent very different districts and don't really care that much about any of these issues.
And just finally, Joseph, what's the reaction from Donald Trump been? I think he has posted online overnight about the results, but how do we think that he will deal with Mamdani now?
Well, I think that Republicans and Trump in particular are going to face two conflicting impulses here. One is to worry because it's never a good sign if the anti-incumbency party does well in these off-year elections. That's usually a harbinger of problems ahead in the national midterm next year. I think some Republicans might be tempted to lick their chops in glee at the thought of having such a radical as a potential standard bearer for the party. I think that's a mistake, though, because, any of these issues about the impracticality of his agenda or the implausibility that he'll do any of it, if you put any of that aside, the fact that he did win this election signals that people are really still very unhappy about the economy. That was the one issue that Donald Trump and the Republicans were elected to solve last year. And we now have an early indication that, voters in New York City and these other states are wary about whether Trump is actually delivering on that. So I think they should be more worried than they should be gleeful about this.
Yeah, we will wait over the next couple of hours and see what Donald Trump does say in response, because certainly Zohran Mamdani is baiting him, if you like, a little into responding. Joseph Sternberg, thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
For as long as we can remember, the working people of New York have been told by the wealthy and the well-connected that power does not belong in their hands. Fingers bruised from lifting boxes on the warehouse floor, palms calloused from delivery bike handlebars, knuckles scarred with kitchen burns. These are not hands that have been allowed to hold power. And yet, over the last 12 months, you have dared to reach for something greater. Tonight, against all odds, we have grasped it. The future is in our hands.
And this campaign was necessary to make that point. A caution flag that we are heading down a dangerous, dangerous road. And let me warn our new leader, if you try to implement socialism, if you try to render our police weak and impotent, if you forsake the people's public safety, we're not only organizing, but we are mobilizing